Hey,
All right, hi. How are you? I'm
good. Hey,
uh, I'm Matt
sorry,
Blanchette.
I didn't mean to mess you up.
It's all right. It's all right. I was already messed up. I was already messed up. I mean, I was 10 minutes late to start with, so sorry about that. Just technical difficulties. So I'm
All
Matt
good,
Blanch.
man. Get
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I'm Matt Blanchette. I'm here from AndersonVision, and you're. I'm speaking with the director James Buddy Day of
Yep.
Blumhouse's Compendium of Horror. I want to ask first off, um, what brought you into the project? Like, what made you want to do it?
Yeah, so I had worked on a series with Epix and Blumhouse called Fall River, which was this deep dive investigative journalism piece into the satanic panic of the 1980s and 90s, and and this kind of very questionable conviction that came out of Massachusetts at that time. And it was a successful show. We won the Clue Award for Best True Crime Documentary Series. And When this came up, I had a relationship with Blumhouse. They knew I was a huge horror fan. They're obviously, leading this horror renaissance, and so I was thrilled to spend a couple of years doing deep dives into horror movies. I was super excited to do it. So yeah.
It's funny you say that. I actually don't. I actually live a little ways from Fall River. It's not like 30 minutes, so that's
Oh yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not too
Cool.
far from the border. Yeah. So, how long did it take you to get all the footage together of everyone talking about not only talking about the films, but the relevant films themselves?
Yeah, it was a long process. I think this is the longest documentary project that I've uh, done in terms of production. Fall River took us years and years in terms of getting to know everybody and before we actually got into production. But we were in production on the show for I want to say over 2 years. It was a really long process. From you can imagine what it's like to coordinate the schedules of the greatest horror filmmakers of all time, just to get them to be interviewed, and then going out and sourcing all the films was a whole nother thing. And some of these films haven't. I mean, some of the films like Nosferatu and Calvin of Dr. Caligari are not. They're not just people you can call up very easily. So it was a huge process. We had a big team working on it.
Yeah, I noticed Hands of Orlac and stuff like that in some of the footage
Yeah,
that you collated. I was like, oh my God, that you really did. You dug pretty darn deep to get some of that footage of like Conrad Veidt and stuff like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's some of it was where the physical footage came from. I mean, some of it was working with libraries, or a lot of it was just actually getting in touch with the filmmakers. Most of the horror movies that we featured and that are in the series are either owned by studio that kind of produced them originally, like a big studio like Warner Brothers or Paramount, but a significant amount are owned by the filmmakers. So Halloween, Evil Dead, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like those movies, we had to actually go like right to the production companies that made them, and that was another that
But
was a whole
that,
another thing.
but that probably made it easier to get. If you already had, John Carpenter, you already had Bruce Campbell. That probably made the process a little bit easier, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, Bruce Campbell's great, and their company was great. Their company's called Ghost House Pictures, and
Yeah,
and they still make all the Evil Dead movies and
I
series.
I know. I've seen a few myself. They're good stuff. So what was there like a specific list of movies that you and Jason Blum wanted to focus on, or did it just sort of come about
Yeah,
as
yeah. I mean, we had a team. We had a team of horror fanatics. Which is all the executive producers. So it's me and Jason Blum and Michael Wright and Jill Burkhart from Epix, and then we had Ryan Turek who produces all the Blumhouse horror movies. He's produced Halloween and he's producing The Exorcist and Carrie, all those great movies.
right?
And so Ryan Turek was helping, and Jeremy and Chris and Mary Licio and all these people. And so we really kind of we looked at we wanted to tell the history of American horror as it reflected the history of fear in America. So that really dictated the choices of which horror movies to feature and which ones not to. And we really wanted to stick to the American horror experience. That was another thing.
Right.
So I mean, what we did is we would look at the events in history, look at the fears of people, and then see how those were being reflected in the horror genre, and that dictated the choice of
Right.
movies. So
So stuff like, the fear of like the atomic bomb, factoring into the 1950s, and fear of
yeah,
social change factoring into the 1960s and the 1970s, So
yeah.
you get all these different versions of, say, Invasion of the Body Snatchers just in the 50s and the 70s alone, just from these different social changes.
Yeah, like Invasion of the Body Snatchers is a great example. You have so in the 1950s, you have the Red Scare, and that leads into kind of McCarthyism, and you literally have people in America saying that your next door neighbor could be a Soviet spy, could be a communist, and people were terrified that they're at the grocery store, they're at work, and the person next to them is this secret communist spy. So that idea that anyone you interacted with could be this alien is really is you can see how that inspired Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where people walking around in America, and some of the people are literal aliens. They're from outer space,
Yeah.
and so that is a really, for me, that's a perfect allegory of what's going on at the time. And then when they remake it in the 70s, it takes on a whole new meaning. And you can say the same thing about the Blob. The Blob is
Right.
a literal red menace. Right?
That's absolutely
Like there is a reason, and there is a reason that the Blob is red. It's because of
yeah.
communism. They didn't.
So,
Yeah.
so what for you, in the process of researching, what was there like a big, did you get like a big revelation out of any of this? Like, was there anything that really surprised you?
Oh, I mean, tons. There's tons that surprised me, just from talking to, just from talking to all the filmmakers, and they'd say, "Oh yeah, that is what we were thinking," because I can say, "Oh yeah, the Blob is a little red menace," but then if the person who created the Blob says that, that's much more meaningful. I remember Tom Holland, who's the director of Fright Night, talking about how Fright Night is an allegory for homosexual fear in the 1980s with AIDS and with the AIDS crisis and all the kind of oppression and
Right.
homophobia they experienced, and how he incorporated that into Fright Night. I mean, I never got that from watching Fright Night when I was a teenager, but looking at it now, you're like, wow, like that is great, like that is deep and
I mean,
sophisticated.
yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, because Roddy McDowell was himself, intensely private about that sort of thing, but he was Montgomery Clift's partner for a period of time. So,
Oh
he
yeah.
was, yeah. So out of the films that you've covered, was there any that I guess influenced you the most growing up that you really wanted to include?
Oh yeah, I mean, for me, growing up, it was all about Friday the 13th, The Nightmare on Elm Street, Chucky, like those 80s slasher Halloween,
Yeah.
like 70s and 80s slasher movies. I mean, my introduction to Halloween is on the 1979 Halloween is a brilliant movie, but I mean, I think I saw part, 3 or 4 first. you
That's
know,
fine. That's fine.
you know,
It's
I remember
just
seeing The Curse of Michael Myers in the theater, and
the one
and
with Paul Rudd.
yeah, the Paul Rudd.
Oh man.
I
I
remember
mean,
seeing,
that's not that bad, but no,
but I mean, I was when I was coming up, and when I was in high school and junior high school,
right.
I was those were the movies that I was watching, was these kind of 80s genre horror movies, and that led me to the 70s genre horror movies like Deranged and Three on a Meat Hook and Basket Case, all those kind of things, and the original Halloween, and then I kind of went from there. Personally, I have just the most kind of nostalgia for that kind of time period.
I absolutely get that. I mean, any gateway, I think is a good
Yeah.
gateway. Um, um, what are you hoping most that people take away from this series when they if they want to learn something about horror, anything about horror.
Yeah. I hope that they just, I mean, I think sometimes audiences, especially like people who are not into horror or critics who are not into horror, they kind of dismiss these movies as exploitive or, that's too violent
Right,
or that kind of thing. But it is a really, really sophisticated genre.
of
And
course.
what any true horror family know or true horror fan knows is that when you see, these movies are often, more often than not, um, allegories for some kind of very dark real world scare, fear, trauma. And so I think that's a really powerful idea. And I hope that people watch it, and then when they watch their next horror movie, they kind of consider that this could be a lot more sophisticated than just kids getting slaughtered in a cabin.
I certainly hope so. All right, I'm gonna have to wrap. But thank you so much. I really enjoyed the series. You
Yeah,
have a
thanks,
great
man.
afternoon. Thank